I've been intentionally withholding some details from a lot of my stories. I started this podcast so that I could evaluate my childhood traumas. But I've let my hopes concerning the way things would be influenced by my memories and not letting them be what they actually are. I don't think there's any reason to do that anymore. At the end of the summer between kindergarten and first grade, I caught the stomach flu. This had all the components of the regular flu. However, with the stomach flu, you threw up in a bucket and not the toilet because you were sitting on the toilet. The sickness is purged from both ends. This lasted about 10 days, but before it had passed, the sickness was granted an extension in the form of pink eye. My lids were fused together by dried mucus that generated over the night before. And luckily for me, tomorrow's the first day of school. When I started first grade, I had a kink in my neck for about 10 days of bed rest. I had 2 swollen, bloodshot eyes. Josh was in another group and he didn't even have my lunch. So the cafeteria bursting with 200 kids, I still sat at a table by myself. I started keeping spare food in my backpack that I would take to the bathroom to eat at lunch after school. I knew I wouldn't stand up to the older kids once they started to bully me. This dynamic persisted even after my conditions cleared up. No one wanted to be friends with the kid who got bullied. Least the kid who's always wearing a cast. The only reason any of this bullying actually stopped was because a kid named Alex. Alex was in 3rd grade and he was way bigger than all the other kids. Around the 3rd week of school, he was sitting with me at lunch. It was quite intimidating, but at the end, he was really nice. He seemed kind of slow. We never really talked at length except for when I finally decided to ask why he was sitting with me. Of course, he had a crush on my best friend's sister, Veronica. Veronica was in 4th grade and was probably the prettiest girl in school. Even as the 6-year-old who fully endorsed the notions that girls had cooties and were obviously disgusting, I still knew Veronica was so pretty. She had told Josh told me that last year, 2 boys actually got into a fight over her. It erupted from an argument because they both wanted to know what the significance of the message that she left in each of their yearbooks meant. One of the boys eventually hit the other one in the forehead with the corner of the yearbook and actually split him open pretty gnarly. Alex, unfazed by all of this, still wanted to confess his love to Veronica. He knew that Josh and I were best friends, and I gathered that he one day would want me to convey that he had rescued me from the bullies. I assume Veronica would be moved by his selflessness. I'm pretty sure she would take an interest in him. Because this was the time when Josh mostly stayed at my house, building the raft and navigating the tributary with me, I didn't have a chance to actually bring it up to Veronica because I simply didn't see her. I told Josh about what Alex did for me, and all Josh did was just make fun of Alex. But he did say he was going to tell his sister since I wanted him to. Honestly, I doubted he would. Josh was really pissed off all the time that people seemed to be taken with his sister. I remember him calling her an ugly cow. I never said anything to Josh, but I remember wanting to say, even back then, that he had no idea what he was talking about. Veronica was beautiful. When I was 15, 13 years ago, I was seeing a movie at a place my friends and I had come to call the Dirt Theater. It was probably one of the best and nicest places in our rundown neighborhood, but at the same time, it was neglected and was weathered, so it suffered severely. This theater had movable tables and chairs on leveled floor. So when the theater was full, there were very few places you could sit and actually see the whole screen. I'm pretty sure the theater's still open. For one of three reasons. One, it was super cheap to see a movie there. Two, they really like to show cult classics. And I'm pretty sure they're still selling beer to all the underage kids after midnight. I remember going to see the old Scream movie and getting a beer for $1. My friends and I were sitting in the very back. I wanted to sit closer to the front, obviously for a better view, but my friend Ryan had driven us there, so I relented. A couple minutes before the movie started, a group of girls walked in. They're all pretty hot, but whatever beauty they might have had was eclipsed by the girl with dirty blonde hair. Even though I only caught a glimpse of her profile, as she turned to move to her seat, I caught a full view of her face, which gave me a feeling of butterflies in my stomach. It was Veronica. I hadn't seen her in so long. Josh and I progressively saw less of each other after we snuck out to my old house that night when we were 10. And usually when I'd go to visit, she was always out with her friends. While everyone stared at the screen, I couldn't help but stare at Veronica. Only looking away when that feeling that I was being creepy overcame me. But the feeling would quickly subside when my eyes would return to her. She was just so beautiful. Just like I had thought when we were kids. When the credits started to roll, my friends got up and left. There was only one exit, and they didn't want to be trapped waiting for the crowd to clear. I lingered around, hoping to catch Veronica's attention. As she and her friends walked by, I took a chance. "Hey, Veronica." She turned around and looked a little startled. "Yeah?" I got out of my seat and I stepped a little into the light where she can see my face. It's me, Josh's old friend, from way back. How have you been?" "Oh my God, hey, it's been so long." "Yeah, a few years at least. Not since the last time I stayed over Josh's house. I mean, your old house. How is Josh anyway? It's been a while." "Oh my God, that's right. I remember all the games you guys used to play. Do you still play Ninja Turtle with all your little friends?" She laughed and I just blushed. No, I'm not a kid anymore. Me and my friends, we play X-Men now. Cute. Do you always come to these movies? I was still reeling from what she said. Does she really think I'm cute? I mean, did she think I was funny too? Because she laughed. Does she actually find me attractive back? I suddenly realized I was just staring at her, and my mind finally grasped where I was. Yeah, I said way too loudly. Yeah, I try to come to these movies all the time. How about you? I come every now and then. My ex didn't really like coming to these movies. It's part of the reason why we broke up. So I decided to start going out with my girls. I was trying to be as casual as I could. Oh, that's cool. You no, not that guy broke up. I just mean it's cool that you're actually, getting out there again. Lucky for me, she was still laughing. I tried to recover. So, are you coming next week? They're supposed to show Day of the Dead. The movie's really cool. Actually, that sounds cool. I'll be there. She smiled, and I was about to suggest, I guess maybe way too quickly, but I suggested we'd sit together. And she hugged me. It was really good to see you, she said with her arms still around me. I was trying to think of what to say next when I realized the biggest problem was I had forgotten how to talk. Luckily, my friend Ryan, who I could hear coming down the hallway, he spoke for me.
Dude, you know the movie's over, right? Let's get the fuck out of here. Oh, yeah.
Veronica let go of that hug. Fucking cockblocker. She was played out of the room by porn music that Ryan was making with his mouth. You know, that. Yeah. I was kind of furious, but it dissipated when I heard Veronica giggling with her girls in the hallway. She was pointing in my direction. Next week, the Day of the Dead, that movie, it cannot come soon enough. Ryan's family was going out of town, so they wouldn't be able to drive us. So I begged my mom, and she replied by immediately denying my request. But I was persistent, and I think she picked up on the desperation in my voice because she gave in. She asked why I wanted to go so badly, since I've already seen that movie before. I hesitated a little, but I told her I was hoping to see a girl there. She smiled and asked playfully if she knew the girl. I reluctantly told her it was Veronica. The smile on her face grew cold. She said no. I decided that I would call Veronica to see if she would pick me up. I had no idea if she still lived at her old house, but I called anyway. I realized that Josh might answer. I hadn't spoken to him in almost 3 years, and if he answered, I obviously couldn't ask to talk to his sister. I felt guilty for calling to speak to Veronica and not Josh. But I dismissed that feeling quickly. Josh hadn't called me in years either. I picked up the phone and dialed a number that was embedded in my muscle memory. The dial tone was soft. It rang several times before someone picked up. It wasn't Josh. I felt a mixture of both relief and disappointment. I realized in that second that I really missed my old best friend. I would call after this weekend to talk to him. But this was my only chance to see Veronica, and I had to take it. The person told me I dialed the wrong number. I repeated the number back to her, and she confirmed that it was correct. She said that they must have changed their number, and I agreed. I apologized for the disturbance and hung up. I was intensely sad because now I couldn't contact Josh even if I wanted to. I felt terrible for having been afraid that he might answer the phone. He had been my very best friend. I realized that the only way I could be put back in touch with Josh would be through Veronica. So now, not that I needed one, but I had another reason to see her. I had to make it work. I told my mom the day before the movie that I was no longer concerned with going, but was hoping she can drop me off at my friend's Chris's house instead. She relented and dropped me off that Saturday. My plan was to walk from his house to the theater since he had only lived half a mile away. They went to church early Sunday, so his parents would be asleep early Saturday. And Chris didn't even want to come with me because he had been chatting with this girl he met online. He told me not to feel lonely after she laughed in my face when I tried to kiss her on the long walk home. I told him not to electrocute himself when he tried to have sex with his computer. I left Chris's house at 11:15. I tried to pace myself so I'd get there a little before the movie. I was going by myself, so I didn't want to just hang around there waiting. On the way to the theater, I figured that if Veronica showed up, it would be too lucky for us to arrive at the same time. So I debated whether I should wait outside or just go in. Both ideas had their pros and cons. As I was grappling with these concerns, I noticed that there was a steady stream of a streaking car light that was overtaking me. It had been replaced by a single constant spotlight. The car refused to pass. The road wasn't illuminated by streetlights, so I was walking in the grass. I stepped a little to my right and craned my neck over my shoulders to see what was behind me. A car had stopped about 10 feet. All I could see were just the most violently bright headlights. They were cutting through the fog that was surrounding us. I thought maybe it was one of Chris's parents that had come to check in on us and saw that I was gone. But I didn't recognize the car. I tried to see the driver, but it was way too dark. And my pupils had shrunken when I faced the blinding headlights. They adjusted a little so that I could see a tremendous crack in the back of the window as the car drove away. I didn't think much of the affair. Most people find it enjoyable to scare others. I'd often hide around corners and jump out to scare my mom. I timed it right and got there about 10 minutes before the movie started. I had decided to wait outside until 11:57 since that would give me time to find her if she was already seated. As I was considering the possibility that she wasn't going to show, I saw her. She was alone and as beautiful as ever. I waved and then walked to her direction. She smiled and asked if my friends were inside. I said they weren't able to make it this time. I actually didn't bother to ask them. I was hoping that we could make this a date. She didn't seem bothered by that, nor was she bothered when I handed her the ticket that I already bought for her. She looked at me quizzically and said, "Don't worry, I'm rich." We both laughed and we went inside. I bought us popcorn and 2 drinks and spent most of the movies debating whether or not I should reach my hand into the popcorn at the same time she did. She seemed to enjoy the movie, and before I knew it, it was over. We didn't linger around much in the theater because it was a midnight showing and we couldn't loiter in the lobby anyway. So we hung out outside. The parking lot of the theater was big because it was connected to the mall that had gone out of business. Not wanting the night to be over just yet, I continued the conversation while casually walking towards the old mall. As we were about to round the corner and leave the theater, I looked back and saw that her car wasn't the only car left in the parking lot. There was another car, and this one had a large crack in the back of the window. My immediate uneasiness turned into understanding. Obviously, somebody that was driving the car was coming to the theater. And I guess trying to play a prank on them, they were injecting real fear into the life of a horror fan. You know, it seemed like a pretty obvious move to me. We walked around the mall and talked about the movie for a while. I told her that I thought the Day of the Dead was better than Dawn of the Dead. She refused. I told her of when I called her old phone number and about my little dilemma, about being anxious to see who would answer the phone. She didn't really find it funny, as I do. But she took my phone and put her real phone number in. She commented that this was the worst cell phone that she's ever seen. Her evaluation wasn't wrong when I told her that I couldn't even receive pictures on it. She told me to call her so that she would have my phone number. I did, and she programmed it in. She told me that she was graduating, but she hadn't done well in school, so for that year, she wasn't sure if she would even get into college. I told her to attach a picture of herself to the application, and they'd pay her to go to any school. She just looked at me. She didn't really laugh, and I thought I might have offended her. I wasn't implying that she wasn't intelligent. I know she's the smartest person I've ever met. I nervously glanced at her, and she was smiling. Even in this poor light, I can see that she was blushing. I wanted to hold her hand, but I didn't. As I walked down the final side of the mall back towards the theater, I asked her about Josh. She told me she didn't want to talk about it. I asked her if he was doing all right at least, and she just said, "I don't know." I figured Josh must have taken a wrong turn and started getting into trouble. I felt guilty. As we approached the parking lot, I noticed that the car with the crack in the back of the window was gone, and that her car was the only one in the parking lot. She asked me if I needed a ride, and even though I really didn't, I said that I would really much appreciate it. I had drunken my whole soda during the movie, and all this walking was putting a lot of pressure on my bladder. I knew that I could wait until I get back to Chris's house, but I decided that I wanted to kiss her when she dropped me off. And I didn't want this biological nagging to rush me out of the car. Just to my luck, the theater was closed. I told her that I was gonna head to the back of the theater to take a piss, and I'd be back in 2 shakes. It was obvious that I thought it was hilarious. She seemed to laugh only because I was. On the way towards the theater, I stopped and turned towards her. I asked her if Josh had ever told her about a kid named Alex and the nice thing that he did for me. She paused to think for a moment and said, "Yeah, he did." She inquired as to why I asked, but I said it was nothing. Josh really was a good friend. If you don't remember, Alex saved me from some school bullies because he knew how I was best friends with Josh and he wanted to get with Veronica. I guess the nice guys do finish last. When I went to go behind the theater, I realized that there was a chain link fence extending off and running parallel to the walls of the building. Where I stood, she could see me, and the fence seemed to stretch on endlessly. So I thought I'd just hop it. I duck out of sight real quick, and I take care of my business as quickly as possible. It may have been a little too much effort, but I thought it'd be polite that she'd not hear or see me taking a piss. I climbed the fence and I walked just a little ways until I was out of sight and I did my business. For a moment, the only sound were crickets in the grass behind me and the collision of liquid and cement. These sounds were suddenly overpowered by a noise that I can still hear when it's quiet. In the distance, I heard a faint screeching, which quickly subsided, only to be replaced with a cascade of thundering vibrations. I realized quickly enough that it was a car. The growling of the engine got louder, and I thought, no, it's not louder. It's getting closer. As soon as I realized this, I started to run back towards the fence. But before I could get very far, all I heard was a brief scream and the roar of an engine and a deafening thud. I started running, but only after 2 or 3 steps, I was tripped over a loose piece of stone and fell hard onto the concrete. I hit my head on the corner of a chair and I fell. I was dazed for about 30 seconds, but the renewed rumbling of the car engine drew my senses back and my equilibrium was restored by my adrenaline. I redoubled my efforts. I was so worried that whoever had crashed the car might be harassing Veronica. As I climbed over the fence, I saw that there was only one other car in the parking lot. I saw no evidence of a car crash. I thought that I must have just misjudged the direction or proximity. As I ran towards Veronica's car, my orientation changed. I saw what the car hit. My legs stopped working completely. Her car was sitting between us as I closed the distance and walked around. She came fully into view. Her body was twisted and crumpled like a discarded figure, meant to represent a catalog of things that the human body cannot do. I could see bone on her right shin cutting through her jeans, and her left arms were wrapped so hard around her back that her head fell on her right breast. Her head was craned back and her mouth hung open widely towards the sky. There was so much blood. As I looked at her, I actually found it hard to discern whether she was lying on her back or on her stomach. And this optical illusion made me sick. When you are confronted in the world with something that simply doesn't belong, your mind tries to convince itself that it's dreaming. And to that end, it provides you with a distinct sense of all things moving slowly as if they were sap. In that moment, I honestly felt that I was going to wake up any minute. But I knew that this wasn't a dream. I fumbled with my phone to call for help, but I had no signal. I can see Veronica's phone sticking out of what I thought was her front pocket. I had no choice. Trembling, I reached for her phone, and as I slid it out, she moved and gasped for air so violently that it seemed as if she was trying to breathe in the whole world. It startled me so much that I staggered back and fell onto the asphalt. With her phone in my hand, she was trying to adjust her body to get into a natural position. But with every spasm and jerk, I could hear the cracking and grinding of her bones. Without thinking, I scrambled over to her and put my face over hers and just said, "Veronica, don't move. Don't move, okay? Please stop. You have to stay still, Veronica. Don't move, please. Just don't move." I kept saying it, but these words started to fall apart as tears were streaming down my face. I opened her phone. It still worked. It was still on the screen where she had saved my phone number. I felt my heart break a little. I called 911 and waited with her, telling her that she's gonna be okay, and feeling so guilty for lying every time I said it. When the sounds of the sirens tore through the air, she seemed to become a little more alert. She had remained conscious since I took the phone out of her pocket. But now more of the light was coming back into her eyes. Her brain was still protecting her from the pain and the trauma, though it looked as if it was finally allowing her to become aware that something was terribly wrong with her. Her eyes rolled over to mine and her lips moved. She was struggling, but I heard, He took my picture. He took my picture. He took it. I didn't understand what she meant. So I said only one thing. "I'm so sorry, Veronica." I rode with her in the ambulance where she finally lost consciousness. I waited in the room and I still had her phone. So I put it in her purse and I called her mom from her hospital phone. It was about 4 a.m. I had to tell her about Veronica. She cursed at me and said she'll be right there. And I told her I wasn't leaving until Veronica was out of surgery. My mom and I didn't speak much. I told her I was sorry for lying, and she said that we'd talk about it later. I think that had we talked more in the room, if I had just told her about boxes or the night with the raft, if I had just told her more, if she told me more, if we just talked about the situation more, I think things would be different. My mom left, and as she left, she told me she loved me and that I can call her whenever I wanted her to come pick me up. As my mom was leaving, Veronica's parents rushed in. Her dad and my mom exchanged a few words that appeared to be quite serious while Veronica's mother talked to the person at the desk. Her mother was a nurse, but didn't work at the hospital. I'm sure she had tried to get Veronica transferred, but her conditions prohibited it. While we waited, the police came in and talked to us each. I told them what happened. They made some notes and then they left. When Veronica came out of surgery, 90% of her body was covered in a thick white cast. Her right arm was free, but the rest of her was bound like a cocoon. She was still unconscious, but I remember how I felt when I had my cast in kindergarten. I asked the nurse for a marker, but I couldn't think of anything to write. I slept in a chair in the corner and went home the next day. I came back every afternoon for several days. At some point, they moved another patient into the room with Veronica and set up a screen to her bed to act as a partition. She didn't seem to be feeling any better, but Veronica was having these moments of lucidity. But even during these periods, we wouldn't really talk. Her jaw had been broken, so the doctors wired it shut. I sat with her for a while, but there was nothing much I could say. I got up and walked over to her. I kissed her on the forehead, and she whispered through her clenched teeth, "Josh?" This surprised me a little, but I looked at her and said, "Has he not come to see you?" "No." I found myself really irritated. Even if Josh has been getting in trouble, he still should be here to see his sister, I thought. I was about to express this when she said, "Oh, Josh. As he ran away. I should have told you." I felt my blood turn to ice. When? When did Josh run away? When he was 13. Did he leave a note or something? What is two? She started crying and I followed her. But I think now we were crying for completely different reasons, even if I didn't realize it. At this point, there were a lot of things that I still didn't remember about my childhood, and there were a lot of connections I hadn't made yet. I told her I had to go, but she could text me anytime. I got a text from her the next day telling me to never come back. I asked why, and she wrote back she didn't want me to see her like that again. I told her I didn't care, that I wanted to be there for her. But all that was in vain. She refused. We texted each other every other day, though. I kept this from my mom because I knew that she didn't want me talking to Veronica. Usually Veronica's texts were fairly short and mostly in response to my lengthy text messages that I would send her. I tried calling her only once. I was sure she was screening her calls, but I hoped I could hear her voice. She picked up but didn't say anything. I could hear how labored her breathing was. About a week after she told me to not come see her anymore, she sent me texts that simply read, "I love you." I was filled with so many different emotions, but I responded by expressing the most prevalent way I could. "I love you too." She said that she wanted to be with me and that she couldn't wait until she could see me again. She told me that she had been released and was healing and feeling better. These exchanges carried on for several weeks, but every time I asked to come see her, she would just say, "Soon." I kept insisting, and the following week, she said that she thought she might be able to make it to next week's midnight movie. I couldn't believe it, but she insisted that she would try. I got a text from her that afternoon saying, "See you tonight." I got my friend Ryan to drive me since Chris's parents had found out about what happened last time and said I wasn't welcome at their home anymore. I explained to Ryan that she may be in bad shape, but that I really cared about her, so just give us some space. He accepted that and we headed down there. Veronica didn't show. I had saved a seat for her right next to me, near the exit so she could get in and out easily. But 10 minutes into the movie, a man slid into her chair. I whispered, "Hey, excuse me, this seat is taken." But he didn't respond at all. He just stared ahead at the screen. I remember wanting to move because there was something wrong with the way he was breathing. It was weird and labored. I forfeited because I realized she wasn't coming. I texted her the next day asking if she was all right, and I inquired as to why she didn't show up the previous night. She responded with what would turn out to be the last message that I'd ever received from her. She simply said, "See you again. Soon." She was obviously delirious. I was getting really worried about her. I sent her several replies reminding her about the movie and saying it was no big deal, but she just stopped replying. I grew so upset over the next several days. I couldn't reach her at home because I didn't know that number, and I wasn't even sure where she even lived. My mood became increasingly depressed as my mother, who had already been really nice as of lately, asked if I was okay. I told her that I hadn't heard from Veronica in a few days, and I felt all the warmth leave her disposition. "Sweetie, what do you mean?" "She was supposed to meet me at the movies yesterday. I know it's only been like 3 weeks since she got hit, but she said she would try to come, and after that, she just stopped talking to me altogether. She must hate me." My mother never looked so confused in her life. And I could read on her face that she was trying to tell if my mind had simply broken or if she was losing it. When she saw that I was fine, her eyes began to water and she pulled me towards her, embracing me. She was beginning to sob uncontrollably, but it seemed too intense of a reaction to my problem. I had no reason to think that she particularly cared about Veronica at all. She drew in a shuddering breath and then said something that makes me nauseous, even now. Veronica's dead, sweetheart. Oh God, I thought you knew. She died on the last day you visited her. Oh, my baby, she died weeks ago. She had completely broken down, but I knew it wasn't because of Veronica. I broke our embrace and staggered backwards. This wasn't possible. My mind was swimming. I had just exchanged messages with her yesterday. I could only think of one question, and it was probably the most trivial question to ask, but I couldn't help it. Then why was her phone still on? My mother continued sobbing. She didn't answer. I exploded. Why did it take him so long to shut off her goddamn phone? Her crying broke into a mutter. The pictures. I would come to find out that her parents thought that her phone had been lost in the accident, despite the fact that I had put it back in her purse that night. She was brought to the hospital. When they retrieved her belongings, the phone was not among them. They intended to contact the phone company at the end of the billing cycle to deactivate the line, but they received a call informing them of massive impending charges for hundreds of pictures that had been sent from her phone. Pictures that were all sent to my phone. Pictures that I never got because my phone couldn't receive pictures. They learned that they were all sent the night that she died. They deactivated the phone immediately afterwards. I tried not to think of the contents of those pictures, but I remember wondering for some reason whether would I be in any of them? My mouth went dry and I felt a painful sting of despair in the back of my throat as I thought of the last message I received from her phone. See you again soon.